Welcome to Foreignness and Friendship, a series of podcasts. We present a number of bonus tracks connected to our radio show. You can listen to conversations with artists and activists, reports from festivals and other larger events, essays, reviews, poetry, and letters. We see ourselves as part of a non-binary rebellion with the intention of creating a language and a human condition beyond race, ethnicity, gender, sex, and class. Tear down these walls, dismantle the statues of power, and meet the other with an open spirit. We present a conversation with the South African author and artist Shubnum Khan from Durban. The first time we encountered her was as an artist in 2018, when we for the first time saw her drawings in Cobus Mohlmann's poetry book All and Everything. Later, we learned that she is also an author herself. We therefore became very enlightened when we learned that she was participating in this year's edition of the Open Book Festival in Cape Town. In the conversation, we talk about her new book, The Lost Love of Akbar Mansil. The US-American version of the book has a very different title. The Gene Waits 100 Years. Maybe because the publisher in US of A believed the name Akbar Mansil would stand in the way of marketing and scare readers away. I'm here at the Open Book Festival and I'm together with Shubnum Khan.
Shubnum.
Shubnum Khan is the right pronunciation. And we're having a conversation about writing and her different publications. So can you please introduce yourself as you want to be introduced?
My name is Shubnum Khan. I'm a writer and artist living in Durban, South Africa. I have 2 novels and 1 memoir, and I currently write full-time, and I do drawings on the side.
Originally, when I kind of came across your work, it was because I was translating Cobus Mohlmann's book, All and Everything, which you have illustrated. So is the illustration or is the art, is that kind of a side thing for you, or does it interchange with the writing, or how do you think about the two, if there's two?
Exactly that, it interchanges. So I think if I'm writing, then I'm not drawing. If I'm drawing, then I'm not writing. They have to work at different times. But that's not to say that one doesn't inform the other. I think when I'm writing, I am thinking about drawing in some way, seeing the image in my head of what I'm writing as a story. And I think the same way when I'm drawing, I'm still thinking about what story does this drawing tell. So I think they do inform each other, but physically I can only do one at a time. I can't focus on a different project in a different medium.
But you're not integrating it. I mean, in your own books, there's no drawings, or did you ever think about that?
I mean, that's an interesting question, because that is something I'm thinking about in the last few days, that got brought up by a publisher and by my agent, who were both we think you should start working on a graphic novel to bring your writing and your drawing together. So that's something I'm thinking about now, but I haven't started working on it.
Okay. And this book by Cobus Mohlmann, before I started the microphone, you were saying that it was kind of a very free and open task that he gave you. He just
yes.
How can you describe that? Because it was kind of an assignment, or he asked you to do something.
I think he found
his text.
Yeah, I think he found out I could draw. I don't think he knew that, because I don't really talk too much about that. He knew I could write. He was my supervisor for my first novel, but I don't think he knew I could draw. And then when he discovered I could draw, he said, I'm working on a collection of poetry. don't you want to like do something for them? And the beautiful part was he gave me free rein. He just said, here's the poetry, whatever you feel like doing, whatever, even if it's just a mark, even if it's just anything. And I had never done something like that before. So I just did whatever they made me feel, which was anything, which could have been anything. He didn't tell me what medium, where, how big or small to go, how detailed. And I really loved that he gave me that free rein, because it opened me up to just experiencing his words also.
So how did you do it exactly? So you read his poetry and then...
Yeah, and whatever it made me feel, I tried to translate it onto the page in ink. I just took a paintbrush and if it felt like a more solid thing, then I would go for a more solid drawing. If it felt like a more free, then, it was more free. I can't explain it, but it was whatever it made me feel. That the words made me feel. Each drawing is different. I mean, I don't even know if they're drawings, because a lot of it is just, for me, they are feelings.
When I saw the book originally, they were they were integrated, the two, because his text is a very floating, very low-key, silent almost.
And it's about these landscapes,
And your drawings also has this very fluid and floating.
And bare also,
and
like
he's...
Yeah. As his words are also quite bare and lonely in a way.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Exactly. So right now you have just published this book, which is called The Lost Love of Akbar Manzil.
Yes.
Who has a very different title in the American edition,
right.
I realized. I understand it as a very it is almost like a meta story, this story about moving into a house in a specific place, and then there is a mystery in this house. And this is, I think it's a or the structure of that story, I have encountered it many places, or not only in literature, but also in our imagination. So I'm interested in how did you create that story, or if we could maybe almost call it an architecture. It's a story as an architecture. This house, and it's placed in Durban at the beach, and then these things happen.
I think it's many things. I think I wanted to tell a love story. I wanted to tell a tragedy. I wanted to tell a little bit of a ghost story. And then I was just trying to find ways of putting it together. And the house sort of became the structure in which I could incorporate all those elements. So the house became the form. And then the stories became the rooms. If we're going to use this architecture term, the stories filled up each room with a different part of the story. There's a room no one goes into. There's a room that's locked. There's a room that everybody goes into. The house is rebuilt, and the new sections join up to the old sections in a very strange and bizarre way, because the rooms are made very narrow, the doorways are very narrow, the plumbing doesn't work. It feels like, I think I say at one point, it feels like arteries in a heart, they're struggling to pump blood. It's just become too narrow and too strange, and kitchens are erupting in the middle of bathrooms. Like, it doesn't make sense, And so I think the story felt like that for me a long time, like a mix of everything, and I was just trying to find my way. And as I found my way through the house, and the house got its structure, my story also got its structure.
But did it start like, is it kind of a realistic way of seeing it when I'm talking about it in a spatial, architectural way? Was it constructed in that way?
Yeah, I think so. I think, no, well, actually, no, that's a good question. It started off as an apartment building, and there was a child in the bottom apartment, and there was an old man or woman in the upstairs apartment. And the idea of the story I had was that the child goes upstairs, and this old person starts telling them her life story. I can't even remember if it was a man or woman, starts telling the life story of their life, and the child is listening. And then over the years, the apartment became a house. And then the house became huge, and then the house went onto a hill next to the ocean. And then the house started filling up with things and characters. And so the house, it really is an architecture thing. It became, from a small apartment, it became a huge house, haunted house. So, yeah.
So it's almost like a construction project.
Exactly, and my father is
as a construction project.
And it makes sense because my father is an architect, and so maybe I was thinking about it from a construction point of view.
Is this usually how you work? That things are spatial, there's rooms, or is it specifically for this novel?
Well, it's only my second novel, so maybe I can't say that was for my first, but I think how I work with any story is I go where it takes me, and however it wants to go. So I do think I build along the way.
No, why I'm asking this is because that I read many novels, and many novels are kind of more like a linear thing. There's a story, and the story is just taking. Of course, there's still some spirituality, and we are also located in different places. But the way this story starts and the way it is raised is very kind of, I get this very geographical sentiment. So that is why I'm asking.
Yes.
So novels are different in that way.
I don't think it was intentional. It just happened.
When I first encountered your work through this Corpus Mollman, then I read that you were also a writer, and then I thought, okay, let me try to see what is it that she's writing. Then I came about this what can we call it? They are stories.
Like a travel memoir.
This is what you call it, a travel memoir.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, that's what I sometimes call it.
Okay, and then maybe it's because I'm also myself a writer and a poet that I was specifically interested in your experience or your writing about these residencies. But I have been in residences myself, and it's a very special feeling to come there because you feel kind of gifted somehow. Right?
Yeah.
Somehow, and this idea that you have in one of the stories about finally being treated the way you are, finally feeling normal somehow, was kind of striking for me, I think.
Yeah.
Because it was very recognizable that the writer goes around in the world and is a little bit like an alien who doesn't really fit in.
Misunderstood,
and everybody. So can you speak a little bit about this experience or this idea of who the writer or who the artist is?
In terms of residencies, or you mean in general?
Yeah, in general. Or this, what I'm interested in is this feeling of living in a world where you're a little bit an outcast, and then there's these special moments where you're together with other artists where you feel more normal, and then you go back in the real world and again feel alienated somehow.
For me particularly, when I started writing, I was like an anomaly, like in my family, especially like a conservative community that I come from. Nobody was a writer, and people didn't know what I was pursuing, and they didn't believe in it, and I didn't have the support that I needed. And I don't even know if I believed I could become a writer until I was published, And so when I was published, then I was like more accepted, but again, still it was a strange thing. People weren't sure. And when I went for a residency, then I was suddenly in the space, my first residency, where it was normal to be a writer or an artist, to be interested in books, to be talking about books. And I felt like, oh, this is where I belong, because people take me seriously what I do. And if they take me seriously, then I take myself seriously and I can do what I need to do, because I don't need to keep questioning what I'm doing. But that feeling has changed over the years. Like I don't feel that strange now, because I'm invited for more residencies and I'm invited for more literary festivals, I get more the sense of like I belong, I have a platform and people who want to read my work. And so I don't feel as much as I used to feel before, like an outsider or an outcast. And also because now that I'm published and a few times, I also know that I'm capable of doing what I can do, and I love what I do and I belong doing what I do. So it's not so much that feeling anymore, but I remember that feeling of when I suddenly thought, oh, this is what I love doing, and people accept what I'm doing, and that was very special when it happened.
How do you feel about the festivals? Because the festivals is another kind of, it is another event in the author's life somehow, and some authors would kind of try to avoid, or when they are there, they feel They express this idea of, oh, now I have to go on stage again or something. But you're talking about it as also one of the things that you're doing as a writer, but also one of the things that kind of identify you as a writer, and which is part of that identity.
Yeah, I mean.
But how do you feel being in this festival or going from festival to festival? Is it exhausting? Is it inspiring?
It doesn't mean it's not hard. It is hard to do, like to socialize all the time, to answer questions all the time. But being part of that makes you feel like your work is, like what you're doing is an acceptable thing. So being part of it makes you feel part of something, but it doesn't mean that it's easy to do. And I like festivals because I live in Durban. I don't get to be part of communities so much as whereas in Johannesburg and Cape Town there's much more opportunity. So I'm alone at home most of the time, and I'm writing and I'm working, and I like that. I prefer that. But I like coming a few times a year for these festivals, talking to people, interacting, and getting feedback on your book from readers, because you don't get that opportunity to talk to people who have enjoyed your book. So I appreciate that. Everything has its ups and downs. It's very intense when you're at a festival and you have to engage all the time, and you're not used to that. But on the other hand, it's also a very rare, privileged position, and it reminds me of my position as a writer, which I like. So it's both. They're important. Festivals are important to remind not even writers, but also readers of the works that are out there, introduce them to new ideas and thoughts, and the kind of conversations you have when you put writers together whose work engages or interacts with one another, makes the world a more full place. So festivals are important, and I think for writers they're both good, and there's pros and cons.
Sometimes when I interview or talk with writers, then they will kind of express disgust even.
Yeah, I think those
because you can think that it would take time away from
writing,
what is considered as a real work, but the way you express yourself about it is more kind of that the festivals are also part of the whole process, and
of making,
and they also give you something back, maybe.
Yes, I feel. I mean, maybe it's not the same for every writer, but for me, I feel like it makes me feel more like a writer also, which is important to me. And I also think maybe it's harder for other writers because they might be doing this more often than I am, and they're tired and they want to get back to their writing. Whereas with me, I mean, I'm single, I don't have kids, so I can be writing all the time if I want to, so I have the time to write. So it's different for everyone. Yes.
But of course, there's also this, especially this festival is a good example, I think, of a festival who also expresses itself as a networking place.
Absolutely.
And also because it focuses so much on South African literature. Then there's a lot of you authors from South Africa who this is kind of a meeting place also.
Yeah, and it's encouraged to be a meeting place, which I like. I haven't been to many festivals where you're encouraged to meet one another, and it's a space where you can easily interact with people who are reading and other writers and interesting writers who are doing different things. I like it's a very special festival. It's my first open book festival, but I can see it's very special.
Yeah, I was here last year, and the reason why I'm coming back is actually that there was a very special atmosphere, and also a very kind of intimate atmosphere. Which and open-hearted, so to speak.
Yes.
That people seem to be taking each other seriously.
Yes.
Now we really have to listen to this. Because this is very important.
You're right. It's open-hearted, and the audience is also very interesting. It's like a very nice mixed demographic of ages, races. I really appreciate that, and it shows the kind of conversations you're having here.
So you are from Durban, and Durban is, in my mind, kind of a very specific place in South Africa. I remember the first time I came to Durban, I kind of, is this also South Africa? Because it's very different from coming to Cape Town or Johannesburg. On the surface, it is because it displays itself as kind of the Indian space in South Africa,
Yeah.
but there's also something else about Durban that makes it different.
Well, it's also very tropical. It's very warm. It's very green. Climate-wise, even it's very different from the rest of the country. You know, it's got that warm Mozambique current, the Indian Ocean, so we don't have much of a winter compared to the rest of the country. It is a very different place. It's and then tropical gives you that feeling of richness. You know, there's a lot of plant, animal life, insects, mosquitoes, cockroaches. Like it's very lush and intense, humid space. So it is different from the rest of the country.
But I think when I came to Durban the first time, also the racial kind of atmosphere was very different, because I was used to come a lot to the Eastern Cape and to Joburg, where it is a black-white attitudes in a lot of places of South Africa. But it was like this racial dichotomy was very different.
Yeah.
In Durban, it was a different story somehow.
Yeah, I think so. I think what you're saying is correct. It's also more like fusion because of Indian. There's a whole Indian history there. So like the food is different, and I mean, I think it is different from Joburg and Cape Town. I'm not exactly sure how, but it is.
But do you think that the place kind of does this motivate to different kind of storytelling, or different kind of literature? Or
I think so.
Or how is it? Because of course I know that a big part of the literary community in South Africa is in Cape Town and Joburg, but there's also kind of a literary community there's a couple of bookshops, and there's also kind of some kind
It's small though.
But it's small.
But it's there. Yeah, for sure.
Some publishers based in Durban.
Yeah. There definitely is a community there. It's a smaller community for sure. But in terms of your question about how it affects the writing, I do think sometimes I read stuff coming out from like Cape Town writers, and they write very like, even maybe Johannesburg, but like very much about like spare writing, if I can put that word, like spare writing, like empty writing, like the writing is very not bland, but like bare. The writing is very bare, like, and it describes it in the best possible way, like the landscape. And some amazing writers do this. I think, who is this guy who did The Promise?
Who was also adapted to theatre.
Yeah, so he's writing, and I mean many writers that I read from Cape Town, but I think it has to do with the climate and the landscape and that bare sort of like, and then the ocean and the rocks and the bare landscape, which is something I don't see on my side of South Africa on the East Coast. It's more rich and lush, like I mentioned, the greenery and the plants, and I think for me that translates into my writing. The writing is very descriptive, rich, full, alive. It's very different from what I couldn't write like how some of very successful writers write that way. So I do think where you are informs how you can inform how you write. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much.
Nice to talk to you.
It was nice to talk to you too.
If there's something you want to say, then
No, I mean, this was a great conversation. It came at the end of the day, so I'm a little tired, but I liked answering the questions, so thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The Cape Town-based South African author who is being mentioned towards the end of the conversation is Damon Galgut. His book, The Promise, was presented in last year's edition of the festival and has been adapted for theatre, staged in the Homecoming Centre in Cape Town and at the Market Theatre in Johannesburg. You have listened to a bonus track by Foreignness and Friendship. If you have built up an appetite for more, then you can follow us on thewhiteafricanblogspot.com and walk in our footsteps by stepping into In My Footstep WordPress.com. We broadcast new episodes of our radio show every first Tuesday of the month, available on your preferred platforms.